Everything has been going very smoothly. I think.
Jinxed us.
I know, right? I think we might be good. So hopefully we're live. Welcome. Happy Friday. Welcome to Mad Gains. Welcome, Madtropolis. We made it. This has been a very long week, and I have a very exciting topic for everybody today. But first, I want everybody who's on Facebook, who's on LinkedIn, who's on Twitter, I want you to head on over to YouTube. That is where you can make friends. That's where the chatter is, and it's easier to watch. And when you get over to YouTube, hit the subscribe button so that you know whenever I'm going live or whenever I drop educational content. Know that there are about 2 years of educational videos on that YouTube channel, free. Like you can learn about doing lots of stuff like contracts, cargo claims, insurance, booking loads, lots of stuff. Also, when you are watching on YouTube, hit the live chat button and you'll see everybody's chatting away and make some friends. So we have a very special guest today, and we're going to do something a little bit different with this episode. But before I introduce him, I want to remind everybody, because I talked about it last week. I'm trying to think of the right way to put this. So I have an initiative. I'm going to build a little Cassandra empire because this Madtropolis, Mad Gains thing is growing, and I've realized that people are very hungry for education. So here's the help I need from you guys. I would love if you guys would send me pre-recorded videos, email me, I'll send out my email information. Send me pre-recorded videos, you teaching Madtropolis about anything you want, even if it's something like, what is LTL? What is flatbed? Anything you want. What is partial? A lot of people don't know what partial is. We should do a show on that. So send the video to me, make it as long as you want. You can wear logos. You'll get visibility to the Madtropolis group. That's 30,000 followers, 230,000 views a month. And you'll have visibility for your company, but you'll also be teaching Madtropolis. I'm going to have education for everyone. So email me if you're interested, or just send me your video. I'm already getting lots of videos and it's really fun. I'm really excited. So here's what we're going to do before. Oh, I cannot forget. I made sure to write this down. I have a very special thank you for Michael Tolbert. Michael Tolbert, you are awesome. Thank you very much. Last week, you gave me a special thank you, and you said on YouTube, thanks for being you. Thank you, Michael. I hope you're with us again today. So now I'm going to introduce a new face. You guys haven't met him before, and he's very special to me, not only because he lives in Phoenix, but because I've known him for a long time. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Cassandra, for having me. Thanks for reaching out.
You're very welcome. I'm so happy you're here. And just so you guys know, I advertised the show to be tell us your worst boss stories, because we all have them. And poor Shannon, I called him up right after I advertised it, and I was like, did I scare you away, Shannon? And you said no. So I think we're on a good start.
Yeah, no, it was good. I think there's some other topics we're going to hit around that too. And I saw a lot of messages from obviously your followers and Madtropolis on LinkedIn. And I think I made a note to myself that if you did just a bad boss symposium, you could probably run like a 2-day webinar and have full content. You know what I mean? Like everybody's got a story for sure. So
yes. And you know, Shannon, when I thought about this topic, a lot of it is because a lot of us are really stressed out, working a lot. Some of us are working 2 jobs because people got laid off. It's an intense environment. So I think in this environment, great leaders are born and continue to lead. And people who have areas of opportunity, they really struggle during these times. And then their weaknesses are illuminated as leaders. And I didn't want this show to be a bashing, like, oh, I had this buzz once. Like, I didn't want to be bashing. I want us to learn from other people's mistakes. And I'll be the first to raise my hand and say that I, myself, have made some bad boss moves in the past. Yep. I have also been a bad employee. So I think we can all learn from this. And that is the goal of Madtropolis, right? Carriers, shippers, and brokers uniting to be better and to learn and move forward. So what were your first thoughts when you when you saw the way I was advertising this, because you got blindsided a little bit, which I love to do to people.
Yeah, well, obviously it sells as career suicide to start, right? Depending on where you're at. But then I think as you and I kind of digested the topic, talked about leadership, what's your style? What do you have for young leaders, experienced leaders? What have you learned most? Like that was the intriguing part for me, obviously.
Yeah.
Like everyone that we mentioned, you got a bad boss story. I remember my worst one, I was younger, probably in my early 20s, and I was working in a restaurant. And I remember when I came in, I just had this manager that they just knew your buttons, right? It's like anybody that's in a relationship, they know your buttons. And I remember early on during shifts, this particular manager would do their best to make sure they were pushing all the buttons. And early in my career, I took the bait, right? I used that passion, that intensity, and it worked against me, right? So, we'd end up in these conversations and they'd get heated and elevated. We haven't even been at work like 30 minutes yet. And then over time, I realized, and it was a learning lesson for me, that it was something to do with them, not necessarily for me. And then by me reacting in that way, I was just fueling that fire, right? And so part of it for me was just maturation and being able to be self-aware. I think we'll talk about that a little bit, obviously, as we endeavor deeper here throughout the hour. But just being aware of those emotions and hey, sometimes those strengths that you have work against you, and you've got to be able to recognize that in the moment.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, actually, I should back up and ask you, because I've known you for a long time, but I would like you to tell Madtropolis about you. Maybe tell us about your career, the team you're leading now or teams, and maybe something personal about you too. I heard there's a rumor that you're a great golfer.
Yeah, I try not to market that too heavily. That doesn't sell well within certain corporate offices. But no. So Shannon, Breen, I've been with Knight Swift Transportation, located here in Phoenix, for over 8 years now. My background's in finance. That's what I got my degree in. Went to Arizona State here locally. I manage our logistics and intermodal divisions for both Knight and Swift nationally. So that business represents somewhere near about 450 non-driving associates, and we have about 600 drivers that make up our intermodal product and help us with what we do there. So it's a pretty massive operation, a lot of responsibility, a lot of different layers, and it's been really exciting as it's continued to grow. And specifically after the merger in 2017, only created more opportunities for problem solving and learning and growing, and we really embraced those since 2017, and hey, continue to move things forward in a positive way. So excited about that. On a personal note, I've got 5 kids, which sometimes shocks people. I've got 3 older stepkids, 21, 17, and Haley, who's 15. I've got 2 little ones, a 6-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. So when I tell people I have 5 kids, they're kind of shocked. So I went from bachelor to 5 kids in the span of 8 years. So my friends joke and call it like I had like the Chia Pet family life, it was like bachelor till 32 and then accelerated like crazy. I also tell people it's quite the experience to be living with a 3-year-old and a 21-year-old all at the same time. You get to see it all. So I have friends that have different parts of that. And so it's interesting when we have discussions because I feel like I'm living all of it at once. So on a personal note, and yes, I'm an avid golfer, as Kevin mentioned on LinkedIn, and love to play the game. It's really my outlet.
So can you beat Kevin Nolan at golf?
Absolutely can beat Kevin. And hey, a funny golf Kevin Nolan story is we're playing one of the best golf courses in the country, and I hate to air his laundry, but he didn't even make the first tee for tee time. I think he joined us somewhere around hole 2.
See, that's what I would do. I'd let you guys tire yourselves out a little bit.
Yeah.
Hop in the middle, and then hopefully I'm energized and focused while you guys are half in the bag, and then I start winning. I've never golfed in my life, but that would be my strategy. Okay. Do you go to the Phoenix Open?
Every year. It's a staple out here. Yeah, it's a staple. It's a great time. Anybody that hasn't been, it's the greatest show on grass. It's great for people watching. It's great atmosphere. The weather's absolutely watching in February here in Phoenix, as you know. So
yes, it's the absolute best. It doesn't matter. I don't watch golf. I don't know anything about golf. And I go to the Phoenix Open every year for the people watching. It's utterly amazing. And the weather's always perfect. So folks, I'm going to ask, Shannon and I might share, I don't know, Shannon, I'm putting you on the spot again. We might share a couple stories or thoughts about bad boss descriptions of your worst bosses. But what I want everybody to do is, while we're talking about it, feel free to share in the comments your stories as well, because I don't know about you, Shannon, but the comments on my LinkedIn post, they were heavy and they were insightful. There were many of them, that's what I meant by heavy, but they were really insightful. And many people owned up, like, I've been my own worst boss, or I've messed up, or so-and-so did this horrible to me, and I promised myself I would never do this to people I led. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I wrote a couple down, actually. I'll give a shout out to a few people on there that I thought really.
Absolutely.
Christopher C said, my worst boss is myself. And I think for type A personalities, that's pretty much par for the course, so to speak, right? So
hands down.
I think being your harshest critic is a value, though. And it can be a driver, but you can't beat yourself up to a point where it makes you stagnant, right? And
that's exactly right.
But I also love the fact of when you're your harshest critic, you hold yourself to the highest standard, right? So you talk about young leaders and what makes leaders successful. I always tell people, hey, if your standard is higher than everybody else's, you're going to be just fine, right? And so that way, it's not about impressing somebody. Hey, what does somebody else think about me? It's, hey, am I living up to my potential? And that's what I really push, not only in my own life, but for the folks that I'm responsible for. And I think when you have that level and you set the bar that high as far as an expectation, I think good things happen. And I've seen really good people continue to raise their games with that type of attitude.
What happens when a leader holds everybody else to their standards? Like I do this, actually. My standards are super high for things, and I expect everybody else to perform just as well up here. And I have to dial myself back quite a bit. And at times, my level of performance that I want is completely unnecessary. It doesn't need to be that high of a level. It's almost a waste of time to be at 100%. Does that make sense to you? Any of that?
Oh, I embrace the frustration personally. So I think whether it was high school and the folks that weren't really committing self to that, or in college, the folks that weren't maybe going about focusing on their studies, didn't have a career path, or in the corporate world where you're working with folks and you're not sure what their ambitions are. And I think that used to be, I didn't understand, to your point, I didn't understand them because we're different personalities, different drives, different desires. But then on the flip side of that, Cassandra, I feel like I embrace it, right? Because I look at my trajectory, the opportunities that I've had, successes and failures that I've been able to be a part of. I think the really cool part is I'm in those positions because I'm different. Or you're right, you perceive yourself, you're maybe driven a little bit differently. And so while you have and harness that frustration, you have to look at it as, hey, this is what's going to allow me to separate myself from the pack. This is what allows me to lead other people and stand out. If everybody was all that way, it wouldn't work on any team or really in any company, and it doesn't, right? It's just not possible. Yep. That's how I.
Wow, that was a really good answer. And just for anybody who's new to Madtropolis, I don't prep anybody for our shows. They don't get questions really in advance. And so that one, so if you're like, wow, well, Shannon must have practiced that. He didn't. I blindsided him.
In the mirror all night. Yeah. Sorry for the bags.
So what else, do you have any other comments that you noticed on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I thought there were some cool ones. So Logan Mims said, I get to spend the whole time slot. We talked about, hey, we could go for endless about bad bosses, right? I think anybody that's been in the workspace has them. So I like that comment. There was 3 that were all in the same thread with May Yackel, James Johnston, and whoever posts for AE Logistics, right? They came in and said, the worst bosses teach you the most valuable lessons.
True.
And I love that line of thought and thinking, because in that same frustration that you experience, what you should be doing is digesting, hey, I want to be very certain I learn from the things not to do as well. And I think that's a great trait as you continue to connect with more and more people in your professional experience, that hey, embrace those things you don't see, but be aware of them and be self-aware, going back to that term we talked about earlier, to make sure you don't follow into those traps as you continue to grow in your career. And I think that's an amazing one from those 3 who really posted kind of that same idea.
I want Madtropolis to understand that Shannon got selected for this episode. He doesn't know this, but But a while ago, I asked Madtropolis, I think like a month ago, I asked Madtropolis, who are your leaders that you learned a lot from and that truly exemplify the qualities that you think a leader should have? And Shannon, I don't mean to embarrass you, but your name came up many times. And in fact, 2 people just texted me and said, you have Shannon on. He's one of my best bosses I've ever had. So it's people who are currently at your company. It's also people who have left. And Steve Lowe is one of them. And he's been pushing me a couple times, like, don't forget about Shannon. So I think that for those of you listening to what Shannon's saying, I didn't just pluck him out of the crowd for apparently just because of his title. I plucked him out because people told me to bring him on for his leadership skills. So bravo to you, because it's a hard road to get to being a great leader, I think.
Well, I think, and that is something that I hold near and dear to my heart. You know, Zach posted something on LinkedIn yesterday. People saw your invites going out and sent some texts. I think for me, it's what I want to accomplish, right? As we look back on a career, what do you want when you look back, right? If you go back to the old Braveheart line, like lying in your bed many years from now, like the things you look back on, the things that you're proud of, the things that like make the hairs on your arms stand up, like mine are now just talking about it, right? Like those are the people you impact, the emotional connections you have, the true appreciation that you can connect with people. Because when you really think about it, Cassandra, and for everybody in Metropolis and joining today, like you spend virtually more time with your work families than you do with your own. And it's crazy to even say that, like that's how at least my career works, you know, that's how many people's career works, that becomes your family, that becomes your friends. You're going to win and lose with those people. You're going to laugh and cry with those people. And so I always looked at it as an opportunity, as an extended family. And hey, that doesn't mean it's roses and rainbows and we always agree, just like any family. But I think that type of response, which, hey, means a lot to me. I think my passion is about being authentic with those folks, knowing that I care about them, come from a place of care. And hopefully over time, I continue to have more and more of those folks that believe I helped them in some way. And that means a lot to me.
That makes a lot of sense. And I like the authenticity part of it, of course. Just so you know, I'm still getting private messages saying Shannon is the best boss I've ever had. So I'm going to challenge you because I've gathered some questions from Madtropolis in advance. Okay. Mostly because of this tough time. I feel like things that were challenges for people, employees, or for leaders before COVID, the whole COVID thing started, now is illuminated even more. So one of the questions is, and I want everybody to know, I did get a message that, and I can't get it to work either. LinkedIn's not working. This is why I send everybody to YouTube, is because LinkedIn is a beta program. It's spotty. I had the same problem. I give up, you guys. So I want to let everybody know that you come over to YouTube if you happen to be on LinkedIn, but it's not working. So anyhow, one question that was a big one that came up a couple times was, what do you do when you love your company, but you don't see a promotional path? You don't see a career path for yourself. What have you been in that situation personally? And if you are, or have been, or you have employees, what's your advice?
Number one is communication, right? So one of the things I pride myself on is being able to communicate both to my employees, but also to my bosses on thoughts, feelings, ideas. I think sometimes people keep those all inside, right? And they build up, right? And there's things that bother them, and both parties don't do a job of either creating the forum or having the communication that's effective in that particular topic. So what you end up finding, and I've experienced this myself, and it was one of my biggest learnings as a leader, it kind of builds and builds and builds and builds, and you have this blowout moment, and then you just start going through the list, right? And you didn't do this, and you didn't do that, and you didn't do that. And it's like, hey, for me, I want to be able to have those conversations, have a chance to solve those problems. But my advice for some of the younger leaders that either have that or people that are struggling with promotions is, who have you communicated that to, right? Because if you're just telling your friends and your wife and your coworkers that, hey, that's probably not going to be the most effective path. Like, have you set up the 10 minutes to talk to your direct boss and hey, put your heart on the line. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's my concerns. I think when you're able to do that, and you should be able to do that within a healthy organization, I think that's powerful. And I think that you can clear up a lot of the communication gaps and problems that exist when you just let it build up. And then you really lean on your peers to almost validate your concerns, as opposed to bringing your concerns to the groups of people that can help potentially change that trajectory for yourself. So that would be my biggest advice.
Because, you know, now that I think back on it, a few times when I have had employees who were frustrated, I didn't know as a leader. I truly didn't know. I probably should have, and should have been doing a better job of asking the right questions and understanding what their career path is. What do they want? Not what do I want? What do they want? I should have better understood that, but it does make sense. I think a couple times in my career over the past 15 years, I get very restless quickly. Like, I need to be pushed. I need to have a path. I don't sit well. And I think that's for a lot of millennials, actually. We can be a little impatient. And there are times in my career which I wish I had been more patient. But when there wasn't a career path, I've had leaders who were like, all right, you're going to be an SME for this topic. Go do this project. Go do this. Like, they kept me busy so that it would give me more time. Or go mentor these folks, or go create a training. So they found projects for me, even though we were unclear what the path would be, because we were top heavy in the organization. They kept me busy with projects and things that challenged me, and I was still learning, and I felt like I was growing. That was helpful for me too, because I'm impatient.
I love the piece you talked about, doing something outside the box to grow and learn. So when people ask me, if you were to say, if your next question, which I don't have your list of questions, but I'll just start creating my own questions and answering.
Absolutely. Go for
it. You'd be like, hey, what was some of your most impactful opportunities that you've had in that growth? It was, we were switching from a green screen TMS in our non-asset business and needed to get to a more robust web-based system. And through some changes and some other folks moving around, there wasn't really a leader or someone to step up and do that. And I had no training, no reason why it should be me, right? But I looked at it as an opportunity to learn and challenge and grow. And getting involved in the systems in that time, right? 2014, 15, 13 through 15, really, that has changed the trajectory of my career, because as you've seen through your viewers and through the conferences, like, technology has continued to escalate. And so oftentimes I look at it like, hey, if I had not put myself, like you were talking about in your scenario, into that uncomfortable, shouldn't be me, but hey, I believe in myself. So, hey, let's go out there on a limb, so to speak, within the org. I don't know where I would be today, or if I'd have that same level of, perceived success or knowledge, because I went in a completely different direction than really most of my skill sets would have said I should be doing. So
that's very smart. And for those of you who are like, well, we don't really have any projects internally, we don't have anything like what Shannon's describing, look externally, especially, well, first of all, now, because there's so many courses and things you can do online, so you can have your employee continue their education. And then once hopefully things open back up, there are so many great conferences and programs that you can send your employees to. I've noticed that there are a lot of employers who don't, for some reason, they don't like to invest in their employees' education and send them to conferences and do things like that. I've never understood that. It might be a competitive thing. Like, for example, with TIA, I think employers sometimes worry that people are going there and they're going to get another job. But it can be such a great resource. So that's what I would encourage some of the leaders out there to look for as well. Don't be afraid. If your employees are going to leave, they're going to leave. Don't be worried about that. I don't think so, but you can tell me.
So look at, for me internally, Cassandra, we're one of the largest truckload carriers in the country, right? But what we don't have a ton of is a lot of people that do what I do in regards to the non-asset piece of the business. So if I were only to stay within that bubble, then the question you would ask is, well, who will you learn from? How will you learn? Who do you reach out to answer questions? Because essentially that division is one of one, and you're really only answering the things that you already all know together. And so you hit it on the head through the conference circuits, if you will, which haven't happened in a while for obvious reasons, through networking engagements. I mean, I have friends all over the country in different roles, and hey, sometimes we'll do like a quarterly call and, hey, what are you working on? When COVID hit, we were on the phone. Hey, how are you guys working through this? Hey, what are you telling your people? Those types of folks that you can identify with that have different experiences, it's a great way to learn. So anybody on this call that, thinks, oh, hey, I can't go talk to anybody elsewhere, like, you're short-sighting yourself, because there's so many great ideas, so many very intelligent people in this industry, as right, with all the folks that you work with. You got to get out and see what else is out there, and hey, bring those things back to your company, and bring those tidbits, bring those nuggets, bring those kernels in, and then make your company great. So that's how you can take advantage of that.
I have some folks that are talking about mentorships. So Amanda Miller, one of my favorite flatbed brokers out of Alabama, she helps funnel some questions to us. And one question that she sent our way is, someone asked, and I've seen this a couple times, is it better? What do you think about mentorships? And is it better to have a mentor that isn't your leader? Or should you, as a leader, be mindful that your employees need mentorship, sometimes not from you?
Yeah, I think I've had so many mentors, right? Not officially. So I guess that's the real question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I have not been a part, truth be told, of like official mentorship programs. But going back to the learning, the network, if you look at those opportunities of who you talk to, who you meet, and you figure out, hey, what are the things I want to take away from this, from a learning, and you're intentional about that, right? I think you'll pick up so much. So I would probably not be the best person on like, hey, formal internships and mentorships and how you set them up that way. But I could tell you I have a lot of mentors in the space that have really helped guide and give confidence too, right? When hey, sometimes things aren't going well, the cyclicality of our markets, it's nice to know that some other people are going through the same things with you, and it's not just this lonely island. And so, like I said, I go back to just reaching out, making sure you've got a strong peer network outside of your org. And hey, you've got these channels like LinkedIn, like YouTube, like Madtropolis, right? Where, hey, if you've got some interesting questions, most of the folks that you reach out to, especially if formulated the right way, they'll respond. They'll engage.
People want to help.
Everybody's really busy within the whirlwind of what we do, but people are always willing to help other people answer questions. And hey, if you reciprocate, you'll have people reaching out to you, and you're gonna need to make time to do that for them. It's kind of a giving tree, if you will.
I've had, when I worked at other companies, one place had a formal mentorship program.
Yeah.
And a lot of those programs depend on the quality of your leader. So what I did was, I ran a really big group at one company. I knew that I have my leadership style is very direct, and I can be intense, and I can overwork. I can work too much too. So I wanted a mentor for a couple of my leaders, and I wanted a mentor that would be the exact opposite of me. So somebody softer with more emotional intelligence, somebody with a different type of skill set. So if you could encourage your leaders to, or help them identify someone that would be the opposite of what your leader is, or someone you want to learn from, without insulting your leader, of course. But I went to that person. I was like, hey, can you meet with my director of claims? Can you meet with him like just once a month and just talk to him about what he's working on, and give him different angles if you were his leader, or coach him on whatever's going on through your group. So I've gone through my leader to get a mentor. And then I've also just unofficially found mentors too. Yeah. So I just find smart people in the organization, and then I keep having lunch with them. And then they don't even know they're my mentor. But over time, they become my mentor.
5 lunches later, you feel like you're there.
Yeah. And they're like, man, she keeps coming back, like gum on my shoe. But hey, if they say yes to lunch, I'm still going. So the other question because we have a lot of really great comments in here. I would say the one question that came up was, how do you manage an intense group, such as a group like carrier sales departments? And I can tell you that the experiences I've had with leaders, and I wrote this on LinkedIn. I had one leader who got right in my face and was yelling at me, and spit was flying everywhere. And I couldn't even listen to what he was saying because the spit kept landing on me. And it's all I could think about was, you can't yell without spitting. And why are we yelling? Why are we yelling? This is freight.
How did we end up here?
Yes, like what? And the day before, he had an employee, I think I said no about a carrier. He had an employee like throw a keyboard across the floor. And so I think for some reason in freight, we get really intense. And how do you manage through those situations, whether it's your employee or it's a leader that's super intense that you are like, wow, not necessary.
Yeah, and I look to our founders, I look to other people in the space. I think intensity is great, right? I think anybody who knows me outside of work, from a golf perspective, from a sporting perspective,
It is great.
intensity is a fabulous thing. I mean, it's what drives you, it's what makes you work harder, it's what keeps that edge, right? That makes you successful. But we always, going back to your comment, we really focus on intense but professional, right? There is a line, and especially when you're on the phone, you're dealing with either customers or carriers, to your point, like you have to keep in mind that, hey, we're both trying to accomplish something here, right? And we must remain professional. And hey, that's at a managerial level. And hey, you know, although I can't say I've never lost my cool, I would say that it's only happened a few times, and I've learned from those times in my 8 years, right? And I think when the people see a leader that can maintain that level of professionalism, and then your directors maintain that level of professionalism, and then you ask of your carrier sales folks to maintain the same, I think then it's very consistent. The word I would use is consistency, like any team. If you're the leader that expects everybody to do it one way, but you don't do it that way, you're gonna fail miserably, because people are going to see the way you act, and they're gonna see your role and what you do for the company, and be like, well, hey, that works for you, so why would I not mimic that? Because clearly it works, even though you're telling me not to do that, right? And so I think it's very, very, very important to remain consistent. If that's your style, if that's what you want to do, but don't expect people to do it differently than you've shown them.
I like that answer. And that also made me think about that example a little bit more. It was a very short stint at a brokerage, but not one listed on my LinkedIn profile.
How short?
I mean, it was 90 days.
90 days, all right.
Yeah, it was a trial run to be the general counsel. And I'm glad it was a trial run to make sure it was a good fit, because right now that you remind me, right after that person responded that way and the carrier salesperson threw the keyboard across the room, and everybody was really upset because Cassandra said, no, we cannot use this carrier.
Yeah.
It's for many reasons. So I realized that when I popped up and looked around, it was actually the environment, the yelling and the throwing and the frat boy kind of stuff. It was the environment, and it was the leaders and coming from the leaders. Now that you say that, which made me realize it wasn't a good fit, because it's just not my personality for that type of environment. Now, some people thrive in that environment. Like Eric Serta one time said, like, shit, I was in the military. He's like, people yelling at you and spitting in your face and calling you names and degrading you, that's just normal to me. And it's not to me, so it's just not my personality.
Yeah, and you may or may not work in that environment, right? And you may or may not fit in that environment. That's okay, right? I think, you know, companies, unlike families, like you can decide what type of environment you want to be in, right? I mean, and if it doesn't work like it didn't for you, you find an opportunity that fits you better, and you paint your walls in a bunch of graffiti and you sit in front of it.
Yeah. So you told me a analogy with basketball.
Okay.
Would you tell Madtropolis that analogy? Because I absolutely loved it about leadership. I felt like it was something that people could take home and think about and apply for their teams. Yeah.
So I did a local podcast a few years ago, and on the similar thought, but I think for the Madtropolis audience, I think it would be cool to unpack it. So, and really the title of it, Cassandra, and for the folks listening, is Leading Without Titles, right? And so as I've continued in my corporate career, this being the biggest company I've ever worked with, I find that titles and compensation seem to be the reason why folks want to lead. But to maybe back up and unpack it a little bit, I kind of give the analogy of pickup basketball. And so when you show up, for anybody that's played pickup basketball or pickup sports, but basketball is a pretty typical pickup sport. I played for over 16 years prior to getting pretty hurt about 8 years ago. But there's a beauty to it, right? Not only is it sports, it's competition, but when you show up, there's no jerseys. There's no names on the back of jerseys. Everybody doesn't know everybody's salary. All kinds of different people from all different walks of life. And if you played where I played, I mean, there's professional football players there. There's professional athletes during their off season there. I mean, the games get very intense and very competitive. And if you lose, you go home, right? So at the end of the day, it's about, hey, who are you going to pair up with? When you get that opportunity to compete, how are you going to win? And then the special thing happens in pickup basketball, which I always loved. After you play with a certain group of people for a long time, naturally, certain people become the leaders. Mm-hmm. And hey, once again, not because some GM or some executive came down from, the stairs of LA Fitness and said, hey, you'll lead this team, right? That's not how that works, right? It's because you've performed at a level, you've done the things that people realize, hey, if we play on this team, we got a chance to win. And if we win, we got a chance to stay. Now I could go play with these other people, but if we lose, we basically don't get to play anymore, or we got to sit around for an hour and 20 minutes. So it's a great example when you watch it over time. And undoubtedly, there's always certain people, right, that end up leading the teams. Hey, you cover who? Hey, please guard this. Hey, let's work this out, right? So you have these natural leaders that arise out of literally a pickup basketball game, and it's leading without titles, right? And that's the part I love about it, the camaraderie of it. And so what I implore in some younger folks is to think about that in the corporate environment, meaning a lot of people, and hey, me probably even at certain points in my career, assumed, hey, and I've had people, hey, I want to be, I need this job. And really what they're saying is like, hey, I need this for compensation. I need this for ego. I need this because of power. I can facilitate change if you anoint me this title. Right? If you give me this captain on my chest, then amazing things I will do. And my always comment to them is, hey, why don't you go lead people and do amazing things? And when the time comes, you'll naturally rise to the top.
Okay, wait a second. I have to tell you something.
Okay.
Because not everybody is as good as you, Shannon, as a leader. There are leaders out there who like to dangle that stuff in front of their employees, and the employees will work hard and they will be performing in a role of, let's say, a director, but they've got that manager title. And they're like, I'm doing all the duties of being a director, but I haven't been promoted in like 2 years. And I think like, I've always encouraged my folks my directs to start working into the role they want to be at, but I will watch them, they have trust issues because there's always those leaders out there who won't give you the promotion for whatever reason. Often it's because they're competitive with you, or there's something politically going on that they can't give you that role. And you're sitting here with more responsibilities and doing more work than everyone else around you.
Yeah.
And that's where I think where this title thing comes the most of the thorn in the side about the titles, is because people look around and they're like, that asshole over there works half the hours and we have the same title. So do you see the swirl around this title business that I'm always having to navigate with people who reported into me?
Well, I think it's very key as a leader to be very mindful of your promotions and who do you put in leadership roles? What do you do with titles? If you dilute those, everybody watches, right? To your point. And hey, it just starts very small, but then it grows. And then you've lost the one word that I used earlier, consistency, right? And authenticity. Yep. And so then people question the whys, and hey, then they don't have a belief in the overall plan, right? Yep. And they don't have a belief in you as a leader because you've taken it out, because now there's a lot of questions. That doesn't mean that everybody needs to agree with your decisions. And as a leader, and everybody that's leading on this call knows, you're going to make decisions that are not popular. Maybe even with a majority of folks, but hey, if at the end of the day, you do it because you believe it makes your business better, your company better. It may not be popular, but over time, people will realize, because those decisions that you make, you live with, you own them, right, as a leader. And ideally, if you're making the right decisions, you get great results that people look then back on and be like, oh, then I got it, right? Now it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Right. But it's very, very important to not dilute those titles, because once that happens, it's a struggle to ever unwind that.
You know, the coolest thing I ever went through, I worked for a company and had the best HR business person. She had like 40 years of experience, but she was all about making the employees better and being the person for the employees. And she had me sit down, it was like for a full day or full 2 days, and map out a succession plan with all the 200 people that reported to me. And she had, make sure you have an org chart. Here's a clear org chart of everybody that reports to you. And then she said, now I want you to create an org chart of where everybody's going to be 1 to 2 years from now, and create I want these 2 people to be VPs soon. Okay, who's going to fill up their director roles? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? Sitting down and thinking through that helped me. And here's the key to the dilution point you made, is it helped me when I had to hire people. I knew where I needed to hire people. I knew I had too many managers. So when I hired someone, I didn't want someone who's going to be, I know this is interesting, I didn't want someone who was going to be like, I want to be a manager, because I already had 15 of them. I didn't need any more managers. I actually needed somebody who's just going to grind and be happy with their day-to-day job in that hourly position. Or you can flip it around and say, I have too many people sitting and being happy with just the job they have. They don't want to be promoted. Now I need to look for someone and hire someone who wants to move up through the ranks. And that was like the coolest thing. Or I would have just willy-nilly just hired someone for a role and not thought like, what am I going to do with this person over the next 3 years?
And I love that you highlighted looking outside the ranks. So 4 or 5 years ago, I started the business in 2012 with a group of guys and gals, and we all grew through the organization and had grown for 2, 3, 4 years. And we got to that same point where we needed someone with some different expertise, different acumen, even that outside look. And so we one of the hardest things I ever did was we ended up moving and hiring this person to come in, right? And you had people, to your point, in that org chart that just had this assumption that, hey, I'm going to take that step. That's my job now that it's open. And I'll tell you that we had some very emotional, like heartfelt conversations around that. The coolest part that I could share with you and the people assembled here is, even though those were tough, I believed it to be true. It was a little bit of tough love for people that I loved, right? That, hey, you're not ready for this, and this is what this person brings. And I will tell you, both of those folks that were passed up at the time for that particular role have since gone on, and it was a learning experience for them. They learned greatly from that person that we brought in. They continue to learn from that person that they brought in. And both of them, if they were on here, would tell this audience, they would say, hey, that made me better, right? Even though I hated it in the moment and it felt awful, I get why we did that, and I'm a better professional because of it. And hey, and those are the tough decisions as a leader, especially in large organizations or even small ones that you find yourself having to make, but you got to be willing to hurt essentially people that you may even consider friends from a promotional perspective, because they're not right for the role. But it's much better than that dilution and moving people up into a position they're not ready for. So, and
to piggyback on that point, I think that it's important that you tell people what they can do to be promoted. Like, I feel as though I had one leader and I was doing the job of a certain level, and I was running his teams and I was cleaning up messes. I was doing everything. And every time we came to talk about promotion, he wouldn't promote me. And I truly, I know it's because he was competitive with me, but he wouldn't promote me. But the most frustrating part was, I would say, well, what do I need to do to be promoted? What does that look like? What skills do I need to continue to work on? And he was like, no, just keep doing what you're doing. You're fine. And I was like, but you said that I'm not fine because you're not promoting me. And I just want to know, what does this path look like? Or, hey, Cassandra, we need to sharpen these skills, or it's not the right time. It was too arbitrary for me. And that's also why I'm an annoying employee, by the way. And I will admit that. I'm an annoying person to be an employee of someone, because I'm always like, what's next? What you got for me?
Yeah.
Let's go.
If you talk to my boss, I think he would probably tell you the same, is that I try to find that line. The status quo never was my best friend.
Yeah, me neither.
But I embrace it. I try to do it in a professional manner. And hey, we've developed a bond of trust, so he knows I'm coming from a good place. And hey, we work through the disagreements as in any relationship like you would. So I very much the same way in that regard. So I think we're cut from the same cloth, Ms. Gaines.
Yeah, it's a tough cloth to be cut from, by the way. I think over the years, there are times in my career where I wish I had been more patient.
Yeah.
And I hadn't been so quick to jump to another job. And I had just learned to be happy in the moment of what I worked so hard on and what was successfully happening in my career at that time. So there is something to say about patience. But
yeah, you can find yourself always looking out, thinking things could be better. There's always other opportunities that could be bigger. You're always going to know someone that got something that seems like it's better, but it's just the old adage, right? Sometimes the grass is greener, and that impatience can lead you to believe that that's always the right way. So
and there's also a flip side to that. There are people who are truly just simply unhappy with their leader, with the company, with their employees. They complain all the time, and I'm like, it's time for you to go. Like you're miserable here. And they stay, and they keep staying year after year, even though they're miserable. And we all know those people. And we're like, what are you doing? How about this one?
Okay.
This question for you comes up a lot in our industry, because it happens a lot, probably in every industry. What do you do with a top performer who's making the numbers, kicking butt, making you look good, but he or she is a cancer to the rest of the team? And I will tell you that I had one company I worked for is a perfect example of this person. He was a software developer, and he was so talented. He danced circles around all the other software developers. He was such a jerk to everybody. Everywhere he went, he was such a jerk. And they didn't want to ever cut him loose. And they had a hard time controlling him. Like, literally, we sat in meetings and he'd be like, that was a stupid idea. And it would just kill the mood. So how do you cut those people loose? Is there a possibility to coach them? Is that possible?
Yeah, I think, hey, tough conversations and high standards, right? At the end of the day, I think from a leader's perspective, going back to our basketball analogy, you're the point guard, right? So you're going to set the tempo. You're going to know when to share the ball. There's a loose ball. Are you the one diving for it too? Or do you expect other people to dive for it, right? You get to set that. So in regards to those top performers, right? Oh, you got a guy that could score 20 points, but he doesn't play defense. Well, here's the deal. Most times those teams still lose, right? I've played against many teams where they're not cohesive. And just because everybody watches sports all the time. How many players can you mention for your favorite sports team that, but he scores, 25 a game and 10 rebounds. Look at his stat lines. Like, he's never won a playoff game. She's never won a playoff game. Like, they can't win as a team because they're so enamored with this one person's skills. And what you find most times, those people either have to adapt to a team culture, or they've got to move on and find a different place to play. And I don't think corporate America is any different. You could have a carrier sales rep come in and I can book 100 loads a week. I do all these amazing things, but if you can't get along with your team, if you're working against your team, like your developer, at the end of the day, probably not going to accomplish very great things as a group. And hey, the other bad part about that is a lot of times those people aren't great teachers and facilitators. So you take all that talent.
So true.
You take all that talent. And honestly, I wouldn't say waste, but like, they're not transferring it to anybody else because no one else really wants to even work with them.
Yeah, and so, they repel people.
Yeah.
Like, that's how employees respond to that person. They kind of avoid them.
Right. So you get no network effect, right? You get no network effect on leading people, which I think as a leader, someone that's passionate about leading.
Network effect. That's nice.
The network effect is like, hey, this person then helps 5 people and it branches, right? Like, like any pyramid scheme would, right? But leadership's no different. So if you start putting people, especially if you have people in charge like that, you've almost just killed a branch.
Yeah.
And so it'd be much better to trim that tree, move on, develop someone just as, you know, and you're going to step back in the short term, but in the long term, I think you'll be a healthier organization.
You know, we terminated that software developer. We tried to coach through the issues, and it wasn't a good fit, and we terminated him. And at first we were like, this is gonna be a disaster.
We'll never survive. We'll never
survive. And it was a little messy and chaotic at first.
Yeah.
But we were just fine. And not only that, a couple other developers suddenly started to step up to the plate, and they started to shine and take the spotlight themselves. And we didn't think, look, I didn't think they even had the skills that were needed, and suddenly they pop up. So it was definitely interesting to see what happens when you terminate that kind of employee. Someone said, I can't believe you fired Bill Gates. Because you know what, that's a really good point, because
you've been downward spiraling ever since.
And the software developer went out to invent some crazy company, and he's like, F you, Cassandra, you ruined my life.
I fired Elon Musk, yes.
Yeah.
Congrats.
I think that I'm trying to think back. I think that in my years of being an employee, I think there's been a couple times where I myself have been the cancerous employee. Maybe just a bad attitude and complaining about the way the leader runs things and having a negative impact on the team. So I think it can happen to anybody. You don't even realize it until you're out of the situation. You're like, wow.
Yeah, I think that's maturation though too, is what you're talking about, because you those are just learning experiences as you work your way. You talked about the difference, and I made some notes between young leaders and experienced leaders maybe before we close, like just the thoughts that I had, like 3 for each.
Oh, do tell us.
I think what you're hitting on is like, hey, you're so different than you were because of all your experiences, and I think that's cool. But for young leaders, I wrote 3 down for me. Ask yourself in the mirror, why do you want to be a leader? Right? Instead of going and say, hey, I want to, you tell your boss you want to be a leader. What are the things? So really ask yourself, why is it that I'm passionate about leading, right? I grew up, both my parents are elementary school teachers. So it was coaching, it was teaching, it was competing, it was being a part of teams, it was helping others, right? That's kind of my core fabric, but how I was raised, what I watched, right? And it wasn't financially driven by any means, for anybody that has elementary school teachers as parents, right? Not that we did bad, but hey, that is a certain tract. And so ask yourself why you want to be a leader, right? And if your answers are money, title, ego, then I'd go reassess why you really want to be a leader, because you're probably going to struggle with leadership even if you obtain it.
And okay, first of all, I wonder, and anybody who wants to put this in the comments, I wonder, does someone actually have enough insight to say, I just want the title, I just want the money, which sometimes the money doesn't make sense, because you can make more money in like an individual sales role versus being a leader. I know sometimes you have to take a step back and pay if you want to become a leader. So I think that asking yourself why you want to do it is a great idea. I wonder if there are truly people out there who are like, I just want the title. And you know what I've done? I've asked, one time I had a leader who'd been in a department for 18 years. And I came in and the department had serious performance problems, so bad that the whole company wanted to just get rid of the entire department. They were done with the department. And somebody was like, why don't we give him to Cassandra and see what happens? And I asked him, what don't you like about being a leader? And he said, I just hate that I'm freaking babysitting all the time. I'm just babysitting. And that just got me, because I asked him, why do you want to be a leader? But he was BSing me. But when I said, what do you like about being a leader? And he said, I don't like babysitting. That, to me, leadership is not babysitting.
No,
it's not. And if you hate it and you have that view, you might need to take a step back.
Yeah.
And think about why you're in that role.
Yeah.
What other things did you have on for notes?
So I had identify your weaknesses, right? For for young leaders, right? Write them down, actually. What do you think you need? You talked about the way you challenge yourself, but hey, write down where you think the skills that you're missing, right? The attributes that you need. Hey, some people that's public speaking, right? You got a lot of people that don't get that opportunity, not through high school, and so they're terrified, right? You put them in. So, when we used to get in offices with big groups of people, back when we humans did that, pre-COVID, I take those opportunities to have some of those folks get those experiences, get those reps, right? Because that's something that they don't get every day. And honestly, some of my smartest, best, most competitive folks, like, they're terrified of it, right? And there's no reason to be, but they just don't have any touches with it. So I really challenge the younger folks to be like, hey, what are the things you want to work on? And hey, that would be something else you could communicate to a boss, like you did. I believe you used that example in your career. And then I think the third just goes to the network, what we talked about, right? Identify people that you can be your mentors, reach out to, email, ask questions, learn from. And then you can be even professionals that write books, right? That inspire you.
Yeah.
Because so much knowledge out there to be had, but you've got to be open to it. And I think the biggest key is, hey, get out of your whirlwind, no matter what role you have in transportation, right? And create some time to learn. And I think you'll grow tremendously through that. That was my young leader list.
That's great. What do you have for experienced leaders?
Experienced leaders. So I have, I always use this analogy with my team on captains, and I always tell them, hey, no boat needs a captain when the seas are calm, where you're going, and all the instruments are working, right? And so oftentimes you used it in your intro, like, you really get to see the mettle and talent of a leader when the instruments aren't working, the seas are 20 feet, food's running low, and people are looking at you to be like, where are we going and will we survive, right? That's the point in time. Hey, when people look at that boat captain and say, hey, we need you, what are we going to do? Let's rally the troops. Let's go at this together, right? And that, to me, is special about being a leader. So embrace the storm would be number one for me. Sometimes you'll find folks that become a part of the storm, and it's like, hey, your team doesn't need you to be part of the storm. They need you to help them resolve the storm.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two for me, if salaries, titles, roles all went away, would your team still follow you, and why? So that's more bottom up than top down, right? Because sometimes organizations, hey, you're the leader because you've been anointed the leader. But I would ask the question the other way. Strip it all away, a la pick up basketball. Would the team still follow you? Would you still call the plays? Do you set the tempo? Do they believe in the mission? Hey, that's an authentic, real way as a leader to know, hey, are you worth your salt or not? And if you constantly are asking yourself that, have that healthy paranoia, that's an interesting way to think about the world.
That's a really good one. You could ask that if you're trying to think about how to develop your leaders of leaders or leaders of people. Like, you're trying to come up with their annual development plan. That's also a great question to ask for them too. If I took the titles away from everybody on my team, who would they follow? Would they still follow the ones that I've given the titles to? That's a good one. What else you got in those fancy lists?
Fancy list. It's a crazy mind, Cassandra. It's a crazy mind.
I love this.
The last one ties in a little bit what we've talked about, but challenge your younger leaders to focus on the attributes, skill sets, and habits of leadership, right? Not the other pieces that come with leadership. I think that's key. And then ask them, hey, are you the person?
Give us an example for that one, by any chance?
Yeah, I mean, I think the quote that I would give with it would be something like, are you the person that gives a larger team the best chance to win, and why? So are you the person that should be the leader, and why? What makes you, and hey, some people will say, oh, and so example, people, this one comes up all the time. I've been here the longest. I've been here the longest. Okay. But that doesn't mean, hey, it's your time up, that you're fit to lead, that it fits your skill sets. That's what the team needs at the time. And so that's one that comes up all the time. Is, well, hey, I've been here for 4 years, so naturally that would be my job. And I look to, I use a lot of sports analogies, so obviously people know some of the stuff that's passionate for me outside of work, but like when the Red Sox went on their run, right? I think they hired a GM that was 34 years old. And they were one of the first teams that did that, right? And people are like, wait, hold on. I mean, you have all these people, and they're like, how are you hiring a 34-year-old general manager of one of the most storied franchises in baseball? And turns out he turned it around. They go on to win multiple championships. Like, it changed the trajectory of that company, but it wasn't next person up based on who's been there the longest. It's, hey, this person is the best for the job. And so I think that would be the example I'd use for you.
What do you think good leadership habits are?
I really like to live by, like, don't do as, have people do as you do, right? Like, follow your lead, right? I mean, set the example. So if you want people to go a certain way, treat people a certain way, like we talked about before, setting the tone, diving for that loose ball. Like, if you want your team to dive for the loose ball, you better be prepared to dive for the loose ball. To look at everybody else like, hey, you should dive for the loose ball, but hey, that's beneath me. Like, that doesn't work, right? And so I'm always inspired to, hey, lead by example, get in the trenches, do what's needed. And I think, hey, hopefully that's some of the pieces that have made me successful up to this point, but still a ton to learn and a ton of stuff to accomplish. So.
Do you have anything else on those fancy lists of yours that we've missed? It's my show.
Oh, hey, that was kind of my 3. I know you kind of wanted to highlight for experienced and young, and I know we've got a variety on the call, so I kind of wanted to share
it was a good idea to do that. Wow. We are lucky to have you. I've learned a lot from you. I apologize to Madtropolis because I've been so sucked in by Shannon. I haven't been paying attention to the comments as much, and there are a lot of good ones. I promise I'll go back over the comments in YouTube, and I don't think LinkedIn is working. But Shannon, thank you very much. I have a feeling that people might reach out to you on LinkedIn. One important thing I did want to make sure I remember to ask you before we closed out, which was, are there any books or podcasts or anything about leadership that you like that you would recommend that we read?
Yeah.
Oh boy, here he goes. Amazing.
Look it up. It's by Charles Schwartzman, who runs one of the biggest hedge funds in the world. You can look up his book. I think the first 30 or 40 pages are fantastic, right? I mean, he essentially runs a $600 billion hedge fund, but his story is very unique in that, like, he says early on in the story, like, he wasn't even good at math. And so, wow. But it wasn't those attributes that led him to his current success. And so if you look up his book, I think that would be a book that in the first 30 or 40 pages, you're like, wow, this is a pretty special guy. So that would be one I'd recommend for sure.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I hope to have you back again when we talk about leadership or any other topic that you like to talk about. I wish we had you on for the Inamoto one. That one was wild. So for those of you, remember that if you want to be an instructor, to reach out to me and I'll send you instructions on how to be an instructor. You can be like Shannon and educate us on leadership or whatever you're good at. And Shannon, thank you very, very much and enjoy your weekends.
Yeah, appreciate it, everybody. Appreciate the time too. It was fun.
Take care, Metropolis. Bye.
Bye, guys.